Well, greetings friends and welcome back, and as you can see, I finally got around to playing Odyssey in VR. And, well, the on-foot sections are certainly very disappointing. As you can see, essentially what happens is it creates a 2D screen in front of your face, and replicates that in VR. Now, I'll talk more about my experience in Odyssey in VR, and there is some footage coming up of the cockpit as well, which is actually fully rendered in VR, which is great. But before we do that, I just wanted to have a quick chat to you about the post I made a few days ago with regards to deleting my commander. So, long story short, as of the time of that post, I have had 643 hours of gameplay. The commander owns all of the ships, many of them very engineered, and has about a 530 million credit balance. Now, what I'm willing to do is delete that commander entirely, no gimmicks, no tricks. I'll do it on a live stream so you can see that it is my actual commander, and start a new commander for you and a new series in Odyssey. Ideally, by the time the post reaches its end, Odyssey will have been fixed in terms of VR, and we can do the whole thing in VR, which would be swell. Now, obviously, that's going to result in a heap of work for me, not only just playing the game itself, but also recording the videos for you guys and showing you what it's like to have a brand new commander experience in Odyssey and also in VR. But I'm asking for something in return. So I will only host that live stream and delete my commander live on that stream if I have reached 10,000 subscribers by midnight on September 30th, 2021, Australian Eastern Standard Time. So obviously it has to be worth my while in order to do it, but I feel like it would be an interesting series for you guys to watch, someone starting from scratch. Obviously someone who has had now 640 hours on PC and about 1,400 hours on Xbox in terms of experience. But starting a brand new commander with the low-paying jobs, and also start a commander that starts on foot without a ship, if that's a possibility. And as I say, I'll play the whole thing in VR if at all possible. So now it's up to you. If you want to see that, then you have to help me get to 10,000 subscribers by midnight, September 30th, 2021, by sharing, posting, subscribing yourself if you haven't already, obviously. That would be the first step, and helping me to get there. Now, this is by no means an insurmountable task. For example, looking at my Anaconda video, as of the time of this video, it has 37,000 views. So if each one of those lovely people who have watched that video once had subscribed, we'd more than triple be there. The reality of YouTube is that between 5 and 10% of people viewing any content on any channel, it's not just me, will subscribe to that channel, and the rest of them will not. So in fact, the watchers far outweigh the subscribers. So don't be one of those people, please subscribe. If you want to see me delete my commander, that is. If you couldn't care less, then don't subscribe. It's up to you. Now, back to the gameplay that you're seeing on screen. You will see that, obviously, as we know, Odyssey is not optimized for VR at the moment. And, well, yes, it very much shows. Having said that, I did think that it would be slightly better than the garbage pile of steaming garbage that we have in front of us at the moment. So essentially, as you can see, all of the on-foot scenes in Odyssey are currently rendered into VR into a flat screen. The flat screen is probably 100 to 120 inches in size, if you were to imagine a real-life TV, and it sits about 2.5 meters away from your face. Now, in theory, you would think that that's a reasonable compromise and that you can see what's going on around you. Now, unfortunately, this itself isn't optimized either, and there is a fair bit of ghosting and synchronization issues between the right and left eyes sometimes. And in addition to all of that, the frame rate drops are very, very noticeable, especially when you get into combat. Now, I'm not going to make you watch the entire thing. If you want to watch someone play this tutorial, or in fact play it yourself, then go right ahead and do that. But I will skip to a couple of different bits. So the combat especially was atrocious. The frame rate dropped dramatically. I was unable to track my targets, and I looked like someone who had never picked up a controller before. In actual fact, I have too many, I would say, years and thousands of hours worth of experience with a controller. So it was definitely the game working against me. And the thing that really struck me here was that other games who have partly on-foot components and partly in ship or other vehicle components actually do it bloody well. You look at games like Borderlands VR, No Man's Sky, even other titles like LA Noire VR, where you move between vehicles and on foot, it is, firstly, it's there. Secondly, it's fairly seamless. And thirdly, they've worked out a rudimentary control scheme. Now, notwithstanding, a lot of those actually use the wand controllers or the Vive controllers or what have you, and not an actual Xbox controller itself. Having said that, what I expected when I heard not optimized for VR is essentially something that locks the gun to your face so that you'd still be able to look around using your helmet, or using your head, I suppose, be able to see things. Those things would be rendered in 3D, but you wouldn't be able to control the commander with the wands, and therefore the gun that's stuck to the side of your head, or perhaps in your stomach or something, would just be pointed at the place that you're looking at. That's what I expected, but that is very clearly not what we got. What we got was just a projection of a 2D screen into the 3D space, which is underwhelming. And with the aforementioned frame drops and rendering issues, it's pretty much unplayable if you're doing anything other than walking around in a starport, certainly not playable for if you're doing any sort of serious combat. And lastly, the screen itself was actually fairly blurry. It was really difficult to see things on screen. And even on screen now, this recording looks much clearer than it actually did in the VR headset. It was blurry and grainy. There's terrible motion blur there. The guns especially are rendered multiple times. So it loses all performance and it's essentially unplayable. Now, for reference, my machine is an i7-7700K. It isn't overclocked at the moment, and I'm running a GTX 1080 graphics card. So, certainly not a beast by today's standards. It was a beast once upon a time, but certainly meets the recommended specs for Elite Dangerous, although I don't think they've got recommended specs for VR somewhere listed, unless they do, in which case somebody tell me in the comments. Speaking of system specs, if you've had a look at the system specs, you'll know that there is more demand on the PC than ever in order to render Odyssey versus regular Elite Dangerous or Horizons. And that certainly seems to be the case in VR. In fact, once the tutorial is over and we jump into the Cobra, you can certainly see some significant performance issues with my machine. And, eventually we make our way to the Cobra itself, where finally, mercifully, it reverts back to proper VR after a bit of a blacked out loading screen and some thump-thump footsteps. Now, the first thing that you will notice is that the lighting looks really, really nice. It looks crispy. It looks very high contrast. And the second thing you'll notice is that the ship model in front of you there is now a 2D render. It used to actually be a 3D model, so like a wireframe 3D model. It has since been turned into a flat 2D render of the 3D shape, which looks ridiculous. And of course, because we can now get up and move around in VR, I've got to shove my head straight through the back of the Cobra, and we see that, well, nothing's changed. There are no black boxes hiding a possible future interior. It is pretty much exactly the same interior as it always was, with essentially just, the wireframe externals and pretty much nothing else. And from the external vision here, we can see that the commanders kind of have a bit of a glow around them, which is kind of cool. Again, the lighting seems to be the main thing that has changed. Now, whilst we're in space, there is a bit of rendering lighting on the sides, which is nice. Yeah, the 2D model looks absolutely horrendous, and I'm sure they did it to save performance, but it's horrible. And also, when you fly your own ships, the models of that ship as well as the starport or whatever it is that you've got targeted is also a 2D render of the 3D position of that object. So, yeah, that looks markedly worse in VR. There's another peek through the back of the Cobra, and yeah, just confirming one more time that it is an empty shell. I was at least hoping that with Odyssey and, with all the pressure from the communities, that hopefully that they would make some sort of interiors and that we would see some black box, areas where they will create interiors in the future. But sadly, it is not to be. For a minute there, I thought the back of the seat was slightly different, but it isn't. So, yes. Now, I honestly think that Frontier could do ship interiors now, and it wouldn't actually be that difficult, really. They have a lot of the assets ready to go, Because really, when you go into the spaceports and various things on the planets, there are things like beds and lockers and all sorts of stuff that are available on the ground, and it would not be that difficult to render those, slightly changed for the ship interiors. And even if they didn't give us what we want, which is, different modules and things, when you put them on the ship, they actually appear in the wide mesh model and you can walk around them and you take them out and there's just an empty space. I don't think that they will ever do that. But given that there are two distinct models of the ship at the moment, there is the exterior view, highly detailed exterior, no details on the cockpit, and the cockpit view, highly detailed cockpit, and no details in the exterior, which is the camera that we're looking at the moment. There could quite easily be a third one, which is simply the back of the ship, transitioned into through a darkening of the screen to go black, thump, thump footsteps, and then you find yourself in the rear of the ship. It really, honestly could be done, and I don't think it would be that difficult or that taxing. The other thing that annoys me about being in this Cobra is that this is the only time, really, that you get to be flown around in a Cobra by an NPC, because Apex Interstellar is pretty much locked to the Adder, and that annoys me quite a lot. Surely Apex Interstellar could also have a premium service where you could pay more money to be transported in, say, a Cobra, a Python, or be able to choose the ship that takes you somewhere, which would actually be pretty cool and could potentially extend the jump range beyond the 100-odd light years that it's currently essentially limited to. When you're creating a jump vector in navigation, it sort of doesn't let you do more than about 4 jumps, equating to, 100-odd, or 80 to 100, let's say, light years, which is a bit poor. Now, yes, obviously, we don't want to be taking taxis all the way to Sagittarius A. I mean, I would, but clearly Frontier doesn't want us to do that. But surely if there was a premium service that you paid extra for, you might be able to fly in a Mamba or a Crate or something else, and maybe be able to fly, 200 or 300 light years as a limit. Anyway, that's perhaps a pipe dream, but it would be nice. And I just cannot believe how the render of that ship is 2D. It is really terrible. Now, you can actually toggle between that and a radar, which is actually, thankfully, 3D with things poking in and out of it as well, which is good. The other weird thing about that ship render is that it's kind of right in front of your face. Imagine holding a bowl up to your face and eating some cereal. That's kind of where that ship render is, so it's really actually much closer to your face than is almost comfortable. So, what to think about this so far? Well, I'm saddened about the way that VR has been implemented for the on-foot components, but I do like the lighting and various other things of the interior of the ships. I like the fact that there is on-foot travel and you're able to do certain things on foot, even if it's not all that fleshed out, and at the moment it's essentially a walkthrough version of a menu system. So now that we're docked, we get a final view of the Cobra before we jump out of it. It does look quite nice. The lighting is good on the interior and it looks clean. When I look on the outside, as well as especially when I'm poking my head through the interior and looking outside that way, there is a significant performance drop. You can see that it does actually reduce your frame rate quite significantly. But out in space, I haven't noticed that issue just yet, which is good, because ultimately that's where you're spending the majority of your time. Now, Dylan Silky doesn't really mind how long you spend in this ship, which is kind of cool, so you can just sit around and have a bit of a look-see, but we're going to stick our head through it a little bit, and we can see that it is a plain white Cobra, which is a bit odd. There aren't any decals, there's no paintwork. Obviously, the hatches for the hard points are missing, but that's just normal, the way it's rendered from the interior to the exterior. We have seen that on many ships before with our room-scale walking tours, of which there are all of the ships available on my channel, so if you haven't had a look at those, please do. And finally, we'll have another poke through the rear door there, just to confirm one more time that there aren't any other placeholders or boxes in there, which again makes me sad. Surely they could just stick a big black box there, like they've made for the Anaconda, to the underside of the observatory down the bottom. But you can actually see that the Cobra does now have a nice shadow, again leaning itself to that improved lighting model, which is the most evident change. And apart from the planet-based stuff, which of course is excellent. So once again, we're popped out onto our feet and we stumble towards the back of the dock before the whole thing goes black and chucks us back out into a menu. Again, being thrown out into this space with the floating TV is very, very jarring indeed. So now completing the training mission means that we can pop back into our normal game. We can see we're sitting in the Imperial Courier at the moment, so it's loading itself in. This is a 3D spinning model. It does actually disappear kind of when you lean towards it, but it is a 3D spinning model, in case you guys were wondering. So in VR, these do look pretty cool, especially for the larger ships. And the models themselves are rendered about 1.5 meters away from you physically. But yeah, again, if you stand up and walk towards it, they kind of zoom off into the distance and disappear. So you can't actually get into them and touch them, which is a bit sad. So yes, jumping back into our regular ship, we can see that the lighting again looks very nice. But again, the thing that throws me is those two models at the front, the one of the Courier itself and of the starport, both of which are now 2D renders, which makes me sad. Now also, you know that I have a blue HUD overlay, but it is very much harder to read seemingly in VR, especially the lines are much thinner or something has happened. I have tried turning up the contrast. It does work a little bit, or the brightness I should say. It does work a little bit to improve the vision, but certainly the monitors are harder to see. So clearly they've been affected by the global light rendering system as well. And finally, popping ourselves into Hollow Me in VR, we see that Frontier has learned from the things that I've been able to do with Hollow Me in the past by finding weird places to teleport myself into and seeing several different commanders rendered in various different states, because they've just shoved you into this weird blue hell. And also, strangely enough, one of the many bugs in Odyssey is that if you try to change something about the face of the commander, where previously it would load a sort of close-up head model right in your lap, which was very disconcerting and scary, now they just don't load a head at all. So you can't actually even change your face or hair whilst you're in VR because it just does not render. So to me, Odyssey really feels like a bit of a work in progress. It's almost like, you know, whatever the thing after a beta is, but that's really where we're at. I don't think we're actually at full release. It doesn't feel like full release. There are bugs all over the place, and certainly, as you can see here, evident in VR itself. One change that they have made, which I do like, is that the projectors actually have a source of light. You can see both on the on these models, which again are 2D. They have a blue sort of source of light there, and on the starport side, the green source of light, which is really cool. And equally, the central projector also has its own source of light, which does look really cool. Goes a long way to sell the message that these are holo projection screens. So I do like that. The 2D renders I do not like. And again, I can't convince you that they don't look 3D because they look 3D to you, because that's the nature of my 2D screen recording. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me on this journey through Odyssey in VR in its early stage. Again, as I say, I don't think it's definitely not VR ready. Well, that's it from me for today. Thank you so much for watching. Please do subscribe if you haven't already to try and get me up to that 10,000 subscriber milestone, so that you can watch me be in pain and tears as I delete my commander and start from scratch. Until then, commanders, take care of yourselves, be good to each other, and I will see you out in the black.